Welcome to the Inner Huddle, a youth football development podcast for parents, coaches and managers of young aspiring footballers. Your hosts from Pezza Street Soccer are Pez and Jeff.
Hello and welcome to the Inner Huddle. I'm joined on location today with Jeff Bonner as normal and Betsy Tuffrey. Before we get into that, we're on location, aren't we, Jeff?
Second time we've done a podcast from a different location, yes.
Yes, and what else is different about today, Jeff?
We're on a Pezza Street Soccer holiday course in Andover.
And it's the first time we're filming one of our podcasts for Pezza's TV. The last time we were on location was at Sarum Academy with Andy Reid, and if you want to listen to that, you can download that one as well, can't you? Which was very good. Anyway, on to today's special guest. Hi Betsy, how are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Absolute pleasure. You might not be thanking us at the end, but...
I'm not thankful you're filming for the first time today.
No, well I forgot about that a little bit. I must remember to tell people about new ideas. Right, a little bit of background about yourself. You're the founder of Seed Psychology.
I
am. You're currently working at Portsmouth Football Club with the youth team.
I had my last day yesterday.
Was it last day yesterday? Did they have
Yes.
a FA Youth Cup game, I believe?
They did, which was victorious.
Oh, they did win?
Yeah, they saw me out with a 5-2 victory.
Okay, excellent. And who did they have? Who did they play?
They played Bristol City.
Bristol City. Good result. Well done to them. And you're moving to Brighton, is that? Or
I am.
The football club at
Yes,
least?
I start with Brighton Academy on Monday.
Excellent stuff. Looking forward to that.
I am, very much so, yeah. Big
Good.
outfit.
And we first met at our Pezza's Elite Training Camp for the course we put on in the summer for slightly older kids, wasn't it, Jeff?
School years 6 to
10 it was,
Is it?
which was absolutely excellent. And we knew then we've got to get you in and do a podcast. So
Perfect.
here you are. And I believe you've also done some work with some of our players at Salisbury United. Is that right, Jeff?
Yes, that's correct.
Good. Which is what? For those listening for the first time, what's Salisbury United?
FC Salisbury United is a futsal club that compete in the National Futsal Super League, which is the highest league you can play in this country, with 12 teams from north to south, east to west, of the highest level.
Good. I'm sure we've done a futsal special podcast, haven't we?
We have, yes.
Again, you can download that and listen to that if you really have got nothing else to do. But that wasn't a bad show, was it?
That's probably our second best one after today.
After today, I look at that. Jeff, you're such a charmer. Right. The format for these things. We have questions, and they are in front of you. I've got a spare set if you need them. And we just try and get through as many as we can. They've been sent in by people we know, or some that we don't. Some are involved in the soccer. Some are mine that I've put in, and some have been from other podcasts that we've done, haven't they? So we collate them all together. It's not a case of just going through them one at a time, because it sort of takes on a life of its own sometimes, doesn't it? You can't shut Jeffrey up sometimes when he gets going. But it gives us a little bit of a framework. So I don't know whether this is a good one to start or not.
I'll do the first one.
Can you do the first one? All right, question number 1, Jeff.
What is sports psychology?
Okay.
There we go.
Hit me with it.
Yeah, hit you straight in there with the big one.
So psychology as a whole is the study of the human mind, behaviour, etc. And sports psychology is exactly what it says on the tin, really, the study of psychology within a sports setting. So performance-related study of the mind, I suppose, is the simplest way to describe it.
Okay. I've written some notes down. I know you won't have done, Jeffrey, because that would be a first. I've just put here that the more I've been involved in football development, the more I realise that the psychology is the biggest factor in everything. And it's the thing I am most interested in now. I get slated for saying it. I say it all the time. I think football's easy. I do, as a sport. It's not a difficult sport. It's not got difficult rules. There's not that many. And training it isn't even that difficult. But the psychology bit is interesting, and it is tough. Different personalities, characters, upbringings, demographics, all sorts of things. Agree?
Yeah, it's made up of lots of different facets. What I can pick up.
Did you read that from your extensive notes, Jeff? I like it. Right, okay, well, we'll go straight into question number 2, which was one of mine. And we're going straight in at the deep end here.
Good.
But I'd like to talk about mental health. Years ago, professional players didn't speak out when they were suffering for fear of being dropped, what people might say, the press, opposition fans, etc. They saw it as admitting weakness, and the support network wasn't there. The game has changed, and there's now much less stigma in admitting mental health problems. Still not perfect, obviously, but it is getting better. But what I'd like to know is if this is transmitted down to youth level that you work with, and what support networks there are for young players in the professional game.
Okay, in at the deep end indeed.
Free straight in with the big one, the mental health one.
So as far as support for young players, in my experience in football academies, it has got down to youth level.
Okay.
There is quite a decent welfare structure for young players in terms of mental health. There is a massive crossover between the kind of work I would do with a player and mental health issues which are more clinical.
Yeah.
So most of the stuff I would do directly with a player would be performance related. If I had concerns that there were mental health issues which were more of a clinical situation, then I would refer on to a clinical psychologist.
Do they have one that the club's linked with, or?
Not directly.
Okay.
Club doctor would be able to provide a bit of an overlap and referral for that. But in terms of my skills as a psychologist within a football environment, I'd be able to provide a level of support. But if there was a clinical diagnosis to be made, that would be beyond my
fair enough. Yeah.
realm. I guess the network that's available to youth players, particularly in category academies, is pretty impressive, probably more so than first team. I think they're really tightly governed by category rules and audits, etc. So from my experience, there is stuff there. It can always be better, in my opinion.
Yeah, anything can always be better. And it's
exactly. So yeah, it is there, but
good.
The
that's
high-profile cases coming through every year now are helpful in terms of young players knowing that it's acceptable and the support is there and they can.
Yeah, there's been a bit of a breakthrough with it, hasn't there? The ice has been broken, and then it hopefully will all fall in place from there.
Exactly.
Over the years as it develops, I guess. Anything on that, Jeff?
It just sounds, obviously to me, it's like diagnosing a physical injury, isn't it? We wouldn't say, oh, that's definitely a pulled hamstring, or that's definitely a broken leg. We would refer them on to someone with more expertise. And
exactly.
That's kind of the way it needs to be looked at a little bit, I think.
Yeah, it's an injury of the mind, you know, and you get injury of the body, you get injury of the mind, you go to the right place, you get it fixed and get, you know, all the help you can. So it's taking that sort of stigma away, isn't it? That's the important thing.
I think that's essentially what the stigma of sports psychology is, that actually it is the mental performance of the athlete, and that is often overshadowed by all the physical demands and what football athletes and any athlete think they need to do in terms of physicality and training and technical development, and actually seeing psychology as the same kind of science, but it is with their mind. That is the stigma. And
it's a lot more accepted now, isn't it, the whole psychological side of it? I mean, obviously when Glenn Huddle brought in, what's her name, Eileen Drury to the England squad in 1998, and it was, don't need psychologists, and again, that might have been one of the start of the ice-breaking moment for psychology, and I think there's been a few big ones. Sam Allardyce was big into it. Bill Bezic, I think, he brought in at Bolton at the time.
And he was at Man United, Bill Bezic,
Yeah, he's great. I listened to some of his stuff online. He's terrific. So yeah, all good. Right. Happy to move on. Do you want to read question number 3?
Question number 3. Following on from question 1, is there anything that can be done from a very young age in grassroots football to help with mental health issues in the long term?
It's quite a deep and big one, that one.
It is. I think in terms of from really young footballers and kids getting into the game, I think the advice I'd give, certainly to coaches and other psychologists, if young players are working with psychologists then, is developing that psychological awareness.
Yeah.
So players being aware of emotions and aware of their own reflections, their own feelings, and being able to assess that, and thinking rationally comes into that in a big way from my point of view. So are players, even at a very young age, interpreting mistakes in a rational way?
Yeah.
Do they think that things are dreadful and terrible when they lose? And that's very much in sports psychology in terms of long-term healthy behaviour, healthy athletes. So I think as a parent or coach, ensuring that the kind of language your child's using from a young age and how they're interpreting success and failure is dealt with really rationally, that can really help to bring their emotional awareness and their psychological awareness on in an older age, and enable them to have more healthy thoughts.
Yes.
And with healthy thoughts come healthy behaviours.
And that can start right from toddler, can't it? Getting that language and behaviours.
From the day a child can speak, they are choosing language, and that might be, particularly from a very young age, that might be from their parents. So actually, are you as a parent or you as a coach using rational language? What sort of language are you using to describe wins and losses and
body
successes?
language comes into it, everything.
Exactly.
The whole package, I guess.
Exactly. They learn from a very young age how to interpret these things, and they're learning from their role models, which often at that age are adult figures. As children get older, they're looking more to their peers and perhaps playing role models for that sort of behaviour. Cool.
I just put it to be aware that parents are the most important influence. In football, I suppose it's with anything, but obviously it's a football show and we only really know anything about football, really, don't we? Which is still debatable. But we try our best. But that everything that the parents say, do, how they act, what they say, the language they choose, their body language, how they react to things, they pick up on it like sponges.
Absolutely.
And I think awareness of that is obviously the starting point and the key. And I think there should be more advice and help out there for parents and coaches of kids from a young age.
The first I'd ever heard of this was from Bournemouth Football Club, where they had a talk with the parents about the things they were saying in the car on the way to games. And when we've been to games that some children or parents might see as a big game, you can definitely see children are playing in a different way because of a pep talk in the car on the way to a game. And that was the first time I really started thinking about...
Predominantly because the parents want to win the game. Whether it be for a nice Facebook post or...
Exactly.
Because Tiny Tim plays for the opposition. He used to play for our team. It'd be nice to put one over on them today.
You can visibly see decision-making's been affected, and it's normally a more selfish behaviour you see because of the extra added pressures that have been put on children as young as 9 or 10, I guess it would have been.
Pressure is a massive one, and anything that affects a child's decision making is wrong. They've got to be able to make their own decisions and make their own mistakes to learn from them in terms of football development. And this is where they get it wrong. So things like rewards for goals. If you score a hat-trick today, we'll take you to McDonald's, and then next week they only score 2 and they don't go to McDonald's and they're disappointed, and it's all these psychological things and mistakes that most parents make, don't they? Every week.
I think going back to the car journey situation that you touched upon, that's something I've said to parents of certainly the Portsmouth players, that those key times, dropping their child off at a game and picking them up, what are they doing in preparation for that match, and how are they being influential? And mostly, in my experience, that's in a negative way. And actually, how are they reflecting on the performance in the post-match car journey?
And the first questions are normally, did you score, did you win, isn't it?
All performance-related
why
results.
Didn't you do this? If they've watched the game and analysing it.
And I think certainly at an older age, so probably from 15 to 18, that kind of scholar day release age, the coaches are so influential at that age, and teaching these players to be senior adult footballers. That's the majority of the information that the player needs to be taking on, and often parental advice is conflicting to that, or parents that think they're coaches or think that their input is more valuable than the coach, or different. That's a real challenge, and that's a challenge for the player. And I think certainly the advice I've given to parents when I've had contact with them through the football club is how, whether they're being a parent or whether they're being a performance parent, so are they being, and I joke with some of the players that they get in the car with their dad or their mum and they'll probably get different reception. So mum tends to be unconditional, oh, you were fantastic. Even if they had an absolute nightmare, you were fantastic, and everything's a bit unrealistic, and that's frustrating for a player. And on the contrast, dad tends to be the coach in disguise.
Pick holes in everything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So parents understanding what role they have. They aren't the coach.
No.
And they're not there to really develop performance in that way. They can be a support mechanism.
They should. That's what their role should be, supporting
Yeah.
in good times, bad times.
Yeah.
You know, when they've plateaued a bit and
Yeah.
when they've dipped and when they're on a high, and every situation know that. I think we get onto it a bit later, but sort of love is unconditional, and that their support in all those times are there. And it should actually be a special time, because it might, as they get older, might be the longest time they spend with their dad or their mum, is that hour car journey, depending on how far they go.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if it's an hour there, an hour back, that's 2 hours quality time that they could be using for positive things, you know,
Yeah.
for their own relationship as well as just football.
There's a great photo of Lionel Messi and Luis Suarez just sat back at the I think it's probably Barcelona
It's Barcelona
Academy,
yeah.
is it?
I think so,
Both
yeah.
their kids are there, and they're just sat back, chilled out, just enjoying the environment and letting the coaches coach and be the coach. And
It's all smiles and claps and
And they know that
encouragement,
they're-
isn't it? But it does change somewhere along the line, doesn't it? It always starts like that at 6, 7, 8 years old, and then it gets a little
Things
bit
get more serious.
serious. But mainly for the parents. Rather
Yeah,
than
and in some ways, I've been sympathetic with parents in that situation. They are really highly invested in their child's development, and they've spent a lot of time taxiing them round from a young age to this club and this academy. And I think most parents that I've come across the intention is 100% support.
Yes.
What actually happens in terms of their behaviour isn't always in the
No.
right way.
And this is where they might need a little bit more support.
Exactly.
Which I think is one of the last missing pieces of the jigsaw, is the support for the parents
Yeah.
at all levels. And this is what this is how you can support your child, and these are definite no-nos.
Yeah.
And these are some things that you could try and...
And are they being, like, I used to write parent newsletters
Okay.
to the parents of 15 to 18-year-olds at Portsmouth. And the notion of the whole newsletter was, are you being conducive to what I'm trying to do at the club?
Yeah.
So how is their behaviour at home, in the vast amount of time they spend at home, is that conducive to what we're trying to create at the club?
Yeah.
And how are you supporting that happening outside of hours? So that was important. And a lot of parents really engage with that and acknowledge that they need a bit of support and guidance, and what should they be doing? Because ultimately they do want the best for their children.
Yeah, and that's the common denominator that you all need to tap into.
Exactly.
That you all want what's best for the child, including the child.
Yes.
And then sort of taking it from there. And I've spoken to lots of parents, and when you explain to them things that they're doing, think, I never realised.
Mm-hmm.
And they're quite open to it, but it's
Some
a lot of them
are.
still
Yeah.
a lot of them still carry on
Some
doing the
not
same
so
things
much.
because they think they know best. But that'll always happen.
Yeah.
But I think if your child's in a professional club environment, especially, there has to be a certain amount of trust them to get on with it.
Yeah.
And if you don't trust them, don't put them there in the first place, type thing. You have to let go at some point. Just let them get on with it, but they can't, can they? Most of the time, it's very interesting. And we're obviously going off on a tangent again, like we always do a little bit, but because this is the topic that we chat about and get frustrated about the most, so it was always going to happen. Right, let's move on. Where are we now?
Question 4.
Question 4, is that me? Right. What's your opinion on players being constantly assessed? For example, players at academies having every game assessed and every training session filmed. Now, I don't know what it's like at Portsmouth, but I know at clubs that I've been at, every single training session's filmed, every match is filmed. A lot of the time the kids will get a copy of that match, they have to assess themselves. There can be some sort of traffic light system of how they've done in key performance targets, or whatever you call them. And then the manager will assess the game and then they match them up. Now I get it, and I can see from technical aspects it's great, but from the psychological aspects, could it be too much and put pressure on them? I don't want to load you up there.
I think,
It's interesting to know what you think.
actually, analysis in terms of video and games, video and training sessions can actually be quite a useful tool for the psychologist.
Okay.
Because I can pick out or get the analyst to clip certain demonstrations of psychological behaviours that maybe I've been working on with a player, So it might be how they're responding to mistakes, how they respond to key events in a game. So even scoring a goal, how do they respond as an individual? Down to team celebrations.
Okay. What if they go off on their own, or if they're a part of a group?
Yeah, or if there's no celebration at all.
Right, okay.
So there's interesting things that I might pick up on from video games. I think on the whole there is a lot of analysis, especially at professional academies. In some ways, the players are introduced to that from quite a young age.
Yeah.
So at Portsmouth, the filming of games starts at 15, probably at Category 2, Category 1 academies, it will start much younger than that.
Yeah, I believe it does. They might all be totally different. I don't think there's a set thing for each club.
Yeah.
It's just my experience.
So I think being introduced to that slowly is important.
Yeah.
And it depends how the club's using it.
Okay.
So at Portsmouth, actually, the analysis is used sensibly, in my view. The players do have access to it. They don't have to pick their game apart.
Okay.
They're not publicly humiliated when the coach brings up the footage and individuals are picked out. So I think they're protected in a way at that stage. And actually some of the more positive ways you can use that filming is, for instance, at the FA Youth Cup last night, the players have a motivational video before the match full of clips of successful performance and goals and
they are great for that.
Seems good ones. The England futsal team, I think they're encouraged to clip up their own highlights reels now after games and stuff, which I thought was quite
if you're doing it yourself as well, it's a very positive thing, isn't it, actually?
And actually that relates to things that I would do with players. So I do a lot of work with highlight reels, whether that's physical or by visualisation. So you don't actually have to get a player, and particularly in non-academy players where they don't have the access to that. Their games might not be being filmed, but going through the process of asking a player to imagine their highlight reel and what that looks like.
Yes, we get onto a bit of visualisation things.
Excellent. So even, you will see the ending montages after the World Cup and Wimbledon or any big sporting events with the epic music and maybe slow motion goals. I would encourage players to actually create their own, and that can develop both visualisation skills and improving confidence in terms of seeing their successful performances.
Excellent. So it's great when because you probably gathered, I'm not always a big fan of it, but I only look at it from one part. From our point of view, we look at just the football development, and that strikes pressure, and then pressure affects decision making and players playing within themselves. I mean, if we develop a child who's lucky enough to get a trial at a professional club, I just think the pressure on them, they go in for 6 weeks and they're thrown in at the deep end. You get all your matches are filmed, all your training's filmed, so they've gone from grassroots to suddenly, everything's a little bit caught in the headlights. They've got loads of kids who might not be nice to them or passing the ball because they try to take their place, and parents are guilty of this as well. Many times I've heard parents say, don't give him the ball, leave one on him in training, he's not having your place, son, and all that kind of stuff, which is getting better, clubs are aware of it. And then in the training session, so we put a kid in who's very skillful and likes taking players on, suddenly he's under that pressure. He's had it easy in grassroots football, and then he's suddenly been analysed and he's got the cameras on him, and then they say he's not doing what he did before, and you think, well, that's because you've taken him out of one context and put him in another. And I think in the past it used to be, well, he needs to see what he's like in this environment because it's a tough world, tough sport, and I think that's too an easy a thing to say now. So I think that sometimes it is overanalysed in that situation, but I can see how it can be used brilliantly in other ways. So go on.
I think if you strip it back to like talking about pressure, pressure isn't videoing a player isn't introducing pressure.
Okay.
But it means that the player interprets the situation differently.
Yes.
So they then think there's more importance on what they're doing because they're being filmed.
Yeah.
So actually, and that's really stripping it back. That's easy for me to say, but the situation itself isn't pressure. Their interpretation of what that videoing means is causing them to feel under pressure.
Yeah.
So whether they then think that mistakes are highlighted, and I think that's then a coach's or an analyst's responsibility to inform them why the videoing is happening and how it's going to be used, and whether that is more, they interpret that as a magnifying glass on any mistake you make is filmed and it's documented, and that's more important.
On the flip side, it gives you loads more opportunity to catch the behaviour you're looking for and you want to see, and you can praise it with that
Exactly.
image shown back.
And actually, I in the past have looked at videos of games and seen things that have happened off the ball that I wouldn't have seen because I was looking at the ball, as we all are most of the time. So it can be really useful. I mean, it can affect the way a player plays, essentially, especially at a young age. But I think then, where do we go from there? Because you're not going to change the situation of clubs filming training sessions and clubs filming matches.
No,
but how can we get players to realise that actually that doesn't change physically what they're doing? The situation itself, the pitch they're playing on, who they're playing against hasn't changed at all. But their perception of what the videoing means is maybe what we need to change. Yes,
and it needs good communication and to be explained to them what it's about.
Exactly.
Very interesting, because now I could be a convert to it a little bit. I guess it's like anything. It's a tool that's there, it's how you use it and how you communicate it.
The Inner Huddle from Pezza Street Soccer.